You're watching this video because you're wondering whether you should get battery storage installed in 2025. Perhaps you're thinking batteries aren't for you because you haven't got solar, or maybe you're of the opinion that it's too late and you've just missed the boat. So in this video, I'm going to be explaining the top reasons why now is as good a time as ever to get battery storage installed with and even without solar. So let's start by talking about battery storage systems without solar. An AC coupled battery system like this one behind me, grid tied. What are the benefits? Why would you want to go down the route of installing battery without solar? So I think the best way for me to explain is to tell you a story about this customer where we are today. So we've just installed these 3 stacks of Sigenergy battery storage. There's about 150 kilowatt hours of storage here, just under. And the reason that we're installing so much battery storage, even though the customer doesn't have any solar yet, is to help him reduce his average cost per kilowatt hour and basically help balance his loads within the property. This is a beautiful property in the countryside. It's actually a spa. And the customer uses a lot of power. They've got multiple electric vehicle charging points. They've got lots of equipment that heats water and henceforth uses a lot of electricity. But they have the advantage that they're on a cheap overnight tariff for their energy. However, most of the time, they're not really benefiting from that. So we've installed these batteries in order to enable the customer to charge these batteries up on the cheap rate electricity overnight, and then to be able to use that power throughout the day when energy prices are much higher, therefore reducing their average cost per kilowatt hour from 30 odd p down to 6p, resulting in a massive saving on their energy bills. So if you haven't seen this product before, I'll tell you a little bit about it. We install a load of these right now. They're our favorite product on the market because they're super flexible and really good quality. Each of these battery modules is 8 kilowatt hours. So this stack of 6 modules is 48 kilowatt hours of usable storage. The inverter bit here on the top can vary from 5 kilowatts all the way up to 25 kilowatts. We've chosen to specify 3 15 kilowatt 3-phase inverters here, and that gives us a maximum charge and discharge rate at this property of 45 kilowatts, which is more than enough to cover the peaks in their usage, but also more than enough to enable them to charge all of these batteries overnight on that cheap rate tariff during that window of cheap energy. Now you might wonder, but how do you actually charge these up during a certain time window? And the answer to that is quite interesting. So every battery storage system manufacturer has a different app. Some of them are smarter than others. We've had a system in the past, for example, where the customer wanted to add an additional Tesla Powerwall 2 to their system, and they built an entire bespoke programming setup using Home Assistant. It was very complicated with a Raspberry Pi in order to enable them to charge and discharge the batteries at certain times to leverage the cheap rates and even sometimes export when the rates are higher. But with this system, all that hard work is done for you. The Sigenergy app has AI built into it, and it will learn the rates that are going on in the market with your energy provider, and it will set itself to charge at those cheapest rates. You can even set it to discharge power and export power to the grid during the time when energy prices are higher, and actually buy energy cheap and sell it high if you're not using all of the energy in your house. And all of that is done with a very simple app that's super easy to understand. So it makes what could be a very complex process really simple and enables you to leverage the power of these amazing products to the maximum benefit for you and your household. But there's another huge benefit to having battery-only installations like this one, even without solar, and that is backup power. Now behind me is the backup gateway. Now this one is a big boy because we've got 3 huge stacks there, and there's a ton of power that's got to go through this property. It's got a 200 amp supply here at this particular property. But the principle's the same whether you're on a single phase system or a smaller 3-phase system. The backup gateway enables all of those batteries to instantaneously switch over and run the property in an off-grid situation. What do I mean by that? Well, imagine you've got a power cut. Maybe a line goes down somewhere down the road and you lose power. Now in the particular case of this property where the customer's running a spa business, it's even more important that you have continuous power to enable you to keep running your business. But even at home now, most people work from home. Sometimes they rely on their internet connection, and it's just so much hassle if you've got regular power cuts. This backup gateway acts as a UPS system where it instantaneously switches over in the event of a grid outage, and you won't even see the lights flicker. All of the power in the house will continue running, but it will run from those batteries that we've installed, enabling you a seamless power supply no matter what's happening out on the grid. And that for me is a huge benefit of having battery storage, whether you've got solar or not. Do you want to see inside? It's quite an impressive thing, this. How it works, you've got a 250 amp MCCB here, so the grid connection comes in there. Then the backup MCCB here feeds all of the power that's going into the house. You've got a smart port here, which is for your generator. So if you want, you can connect a generator to the system as well. And this system can work entirely off grid. Like, you don't actually need a grid connection for this. If you've got enough batteries and solar, you can run this entire property off grid if you wanted to, especially if you've got a generator for the winter months. And then here we've got a surge protection device and 6 outgoing ways for 6 inverters. That means that in addition to the 3 inverters and battery stacks that we fitted here already, we could fit another 3 in the future if we wanted to, for up to 300 kilowatt hours of battery storage. This is a C120 gateway, and we've got multiple projects ongoing with these gateways at the moment, and it enables a large amount of battery storage to be installed on a 3-phase supply where the customer uses a ton of power. So as you can see, it's quite an impressive setup inside here with all of these various bus bars. The gateway comes pre-built like this, which is fantastic. So all we need to do is mount it on the wall and then connect our incoming supply from the grid and our outgoing supply to the main distribution board. Now for this one, we've installed a 95mm 4-core steel wire armoured cable from the main isolator switch into here, and then out of this to the main bus bar chamber for the property, and then out of that bus bar chamber it distributes out to all the various distribution boards throughout the property. And then in here we've installed the 3 circuits for the 3 Sigenergy stacks. Each one has a 10mm 5-core steel wire armoured cable going out to it. And then there is a data connection as well that connects between this and the first Sigenergy stack, and then the Sigenergy stacks loop into each other so that they can all communicate with each other. They've all got that hardwired Ethernet connection between them. So we're about to do the big shut down the main power to the house while we connect these armoureds that are going in and out of the gateway. These are 95mm 4-core armoureds, pretty chunky. We've got to gland those into this bus bar chamber here. One will come out of the main switch there into the gateway, and then out of the gateway it's going to come into this bus bar chamber, and then out of there it distributes to all of these various switch fuses which provide power to all the different areas of the property. It's quite a big setup here, well, big for a residential property anyway, and it's going to be fun getting these all glanded in. There we go. Boom. So while we're shutting down the power, we don't want the customer to lose their internet because they've got customers in here still staying. So we use these. We've got these little battery backup banks. We can plug in the main router and all of the IT equipment to this, and it'll last a couple of hours while we've got the power shut down, keep the customer's internet going. This is tool of the day today, so I'll leave a link in the description below. It's such a handy thing for electricians or people who like camping or whatever, who need a little portable battery bank. We'll leave a link below. Now, one of the most important things to factor in when designing a system like this is the charge time, because if you're planning the entire system around charging the batteries on the cheap rate overnight, you want to make sure that you can actually charge all of these batteries up within the window that you've got of cheap electricity. So for example, most people have a 5-hour window. So you can size the inverters and the batteries, taking into consideration the maximum charge rate of the batteries to be able to be filled up within that time. For example, these stacks of 48 kilowatt hour battery systems have a 15 kilowatt inverter in. So if you take 48, divide it by 15, that gives us about 3.2 hours to fully charge these batteries. That's absolutely fine because the customer has a 5-hour cheap energy window. But we could even go slightly smaller on the inverters if we wanted to, but it all depends on what their maximum demand is as well. Because what we want to be able to do is discharge the batteries to match their peak demand in the property as well. So for example, if we took these down to 10 kilowatt inverters, then the maximum charge and discharge rate of the entire system would be 30 kilowatt. That might not be enough to cover all of the loads within the property. It would mean that the batteries would charge up slower, but still probably within that window. So if we fitted 10 kilowatt inverters, 48 divided by 10 gives us 4.8 hours. In other words, it would just be within that 5-hour window. Now, why might you want to lower the size of the inverters? Well, it might be to do with the DNO application. So whenever we have to install a system like this, we have to do what's called a G99 application to connect the system to the grid. And sometimes the DNO, distribution network operator, like UK Power Networks or others throughout the UK, will come back and say, oh, your maximum inverter size that you can fit at this property is X amount. It can be up to 100 kilowatt on 3-phase. Single phase is usually a lot less. So within that restriction, we might need to lower the size of the inverters to meet their requirements while still enabling us to charge the batteries within that cheap energy window. So as you can see, there's quite a lot to factor in, but if you get a good installer who knows what they're doing, then they can design the system to meet your needs, but also the requirements of the DNO. Now, there's one other really important thing to factor in when installing a battery storage system, and that is that each battery module has its own maximum charge and discharge rate as well. So these 8 kilowatt hour modules have a maximum charge and discharge rate of 4 kilowatt or 0.5 C. What that means is that if you only fitted one battery module with a 15 kilowatt inverter, it would still only be able to charge and discharge at 4 kilowatt. It's not going to charge and discharge at 8. So if you've got a maximum charge rate that you need to achieve, then you're going to need to install enough battery modules to meet that maximum charge rate. For example, this 48 kilowatt hour stack, the maximum charge and discharge rate of the battery modules together would be 24 kilowatts. So with a 25 kilowatt inverter, you're going to be able to charge and discharge them at 24 kilowatts, in other words, the full rate that the batteries are capable of. So there are those two things to take into consideration. One is your inverter size, but the other one that's really important is the C rating of the batteries. In other words, how fast the individual battery modules can charge and discharge. And not all batteries have the same C rate. Some have a rating of 1C, others half a C, others somewhere in between. Now, for a lot of customers that we've installed these systems for, they use them in a really clever way based on what tariff they're on. Some tariffs allow you to sell power back to the grid when the energy prices are high, usually between 5 and 7 PM when everyone gets home and puts the kettle on. That enables the customer to charge the batteries up at, say, 6 pence per kilowatt hour and export the power from the batteries at the end of the day at a much higher rate, sometimes even up to £1 per kilowatt hour if energy demand is really high. Now, the honest truth about this is that energy prices will change over time. It might not always be possible to get really cheap overnight electricity. It might not always be possible to sell the electricity back to the grid at such high rates. We just don't know. But the fact is, with a system like this, you have flexibility so that no matter what happens with the energy prices, you're in control of your energy. You can take power from the grid when you want to. You can export power to the grid when you want to, if you want to. And it just gives you much more control over the way you use your energy. If you like the look of this system and you think that this kind of system might be of benefit to you, we'd love to help. I'll leave a link below to our virtual site survey tool, where with a few steps you can give us all the information that we need in order to have an overview of your setup and give you a ballpark quote. We'd love to hear from you. So we've talked about battery installs without solar, but what about with solar? Imagine you've got a solar PV system already, but you don't have battery storage. What are the benefits and advantages of fitting battery storage in that case? Well, there are so many, but the obvious one is that a lot of people who've got solar are generating a ton of energy during the day. Like today when it's super sunny, a lot of people are generating more energy than they're actually using in the house. So they're probably exporting a lot out to the grid. Now, some people are on old feed-in tariffs that are getting paid high rates for their export, but nowadays if you get a system installed, you're only going to get a few pence per kilowatt hour for the power that you export to the grid. And then in the evening, you're going to be pulling power back in from the grid at a much higher price. So it makes more sense to store that excess solar energy in a battery during the day. And then when the sun goes down, rather than you pulling from the grid, the battery kicks in and provides that extra power that you need to run the house overnight. The other reality about solar, particularly in the UK, is that the amount of generation that you're going to get is not going to be the same all year round. Yes, in spring and summer and maybe early autumn, when the sunny days like this happen, you're going to get a lot of generation. But over the winter months, usually from October through to February time, the generation is going to be a lot less. We see this big curve in generation across from the summer down to the winter. And so in winter, it's very unlikely that you're going to actually have enough solar PV power to run all of your usage in the house. And that's where supplementing with a battery can really help. What you can do is use a cheap overnight tariff to charge the batteries partially or even fully overnight to supplement any solar that you might have during the day during those winter months. That can therefore reduce the amount of power you're pulling from the grid at peak rate during those winter months, and offsetting that with the solar generation that you get in the summer. It's a perfect combination. Now there's another massive advantage to battery storage systems, and that is island mode. A lot of people, particularly nowadays with all the chaos going on in the world, want to have energy independence. What does that mean? It means that they want to be off grid basically, or rely on the grid as little as possible. Now, I would say that there are two types of off-grid setups. There's true off-grid, where you literally have no physical connection to the grid. It's as if this bridge here didn't exist, it gets cut off and thrown away. You're on an island here, and what that means is that you've got to have all of the resources that you need to run this island constantly. Now, that usually costs a lot more, like exponentially more than a system that is connected to the grid but relies on it as little as possible. The reason for that is that in the heart of winter, for example, imagine you've got solar panels, you've got batteries, but it snows. The solar panels are covered by the snow. For days, you have no generation. What do? Well, probably you need a generator as a backup. A generator costs a lot. A generator is going to consume a lot of fuel as well. Not only that, but for the rest of the year when the panels are exposed, you need a solar PV system so big that even in the heart of winter, it can generate enough solar energy to run all of your energy needs. And that means massively oversizing the solar PV system in order to produce that amount of energy, to store enough energy to run the property overnight. Now, some people have an unlimited budget and they just want to be truly off grid, and that's great, you know, and if you do, we can help with that. But other people want to find a more reasonable balance. So what we do is we design a system that is virtually off-grid, and what that means is that although they do have a physical connection to the grid, we design the system with the aim of about 90% self-consumption. In other words, only 10% of the customer's energy needs will come from the grid on average throughout the year. That grid connection is useful because it acts as almost like an infinite battery that they can pull from when they need it, but only if they need it. And it's kind of like an emergency lifeline, a bit like this bridge where you're connected, and if you need anything, you can quickly hop over the bridge and grab something from the mainland. It makes the systems a lot more reasonable in terms of cost, but you're not truly off-grid, but you're still generating most of your energy yourself, so you're sort of nearly completely self-sufficient. That's the goal for a lot of people. Now you might say, yeah, Jordan, but you've not talked about all the downsides to battery storage. And I would say there aren't really any disadvantages, but there are considerations, things that you need to take into consideration to see whether it's possible for you to install battery storage, and things to think about, important questions to answer. For example, number one is space, right? As you can see, this system takes up a lot of space. Now, a detached garage like this is ideal. There are guidelines around battery storage installations, which not everyone is aware of. There's a document called PAS 63100, which is guidelines around the installation of energy storage systems, and it takes into consideration a lot of factors that are important for fire safety, fire escapes, lots of things for the fire department. For example, better to have them in a detached garage or on the outside of a property. There should be a linked smoke alarm system nearby so that if there is a fire in the area of the batteries, that is linked in with the main house and everyone is made aware. It's just also wall space, right? So you need a large amount of wall space to fit batteries on. Now, one stack like this might be sufficient for most householders. That's 48 kilowatt hours, and there's about 2 meter by 1 meter space needed. We do need a bit of clearance between each stack for the manufacturer's instructions to give ventilation, etc. around the system. Now, there are smaller, more compact systems out there, but in general, I'd say most people do need at least a 1 meter by 1 meter space in order to fit a reasonable battery storage system in place. And what I would say is you should never install batteries in lofts. And that's a guideline from the PAS 63100 document as well. Now, another important factor is obviously cost. Batteries are not cheap. Any renewable energy installation, batteries are a significant part of that cost. And a system like this behind me costs tens of thousands to install. However, the benefits can be huge if it's a good fit for your needs. Another important thing to consider is the state of your existing electrics. Often when we come to a property like this and we're installing a significant amount of battery storage or solar, we look at the existing electrics and there are certain upgrades that are needed in order to make everything safe and compliant to connect a system like this to. So the electrician who's designing your system will look at all of that stuff, factor it all in, but there may be additional work and costs needed to get everything up to scratch. There is also something that we need to do with earthing. When we're providing backup power, we need to install an earth electrode. So we've done that here. We've buried a conduit disc, earthing disc, which is a big cement disc that's conductive concrete, buried in the ground. It gives us a really good backup earth provision. And you've got to consider your supply size as well. If you've got a big enough supply coming into the property to handle the charge and discharge rate that your battery system will need. So who is the perfect candidate for a system like this, battery only? Well, it's somebody who is a very high user of energy, who has very high energy bills, and who relies a lot on the power to their property for running their business or for other reasons. Anyone like that is in a really good position to get a system like this because the benefits are going to be huge, enabling the overall energy cost to be massively reduced at the property by running the property on those cheap overnight rates, enabling full backup power to the property to give energy security. Those are two massive benefits for a customer with high energy use and high reliance on energy to run their home. What about the perfect candidate for adding battery storage to an existing solar system? Well, the perfect person for that scenario is the person who's got a large solar PV system, but currently no battery storage, and they're exporting a lot of power to the grid at certain times. Adding battery is going to enable them to harness that excess solar, store it in a battery, and use that power to run their house overnight. The other scenario is one where the customer is a high energy user but only has a small solar PV system and can't add more. Battery storage added to a system like that can enable leveraging cheap overnight rates to cover the energy use in the winter months and lower the cost of energy at the property. So if either of those scenarios applies to you, there's a link below where you can get in touch and we'll be happy to look at the service for you and see what kind of system would be suitable for your needs. Now, this isn't the only brand of battery storage we install. At Artisan Electrics, we're brand neutral, in inverted commas. What that means is that we recommend the best system depending on our customers' needs. And you'll have seen it on our channel. We fitted so many different types of battery storage systems over the years from different manufacturers. And we believe that tailoring the system to meet the customer's needs is the most important thing. Not every system is the best fit for every customer. We need to find the right balance based on the customer's energy usage needs and all of the other things that go into consideration. So for example, we fit Sigenergy a lot because it does fit a lot of people's needs. Sometimes we fit the Tesla Powerwall system too. We fitted the Anchor system also. And there are other systems that we do fit. For example, SolarEdge. Sometimes if the customers have got an existing SolarEdge inverter, we'd fit a DC coupled SolarEdge battery system sometimes. So lots of different scenarios depending on your needs, but there are some great products out there like this one that can seriously help with your energy needs by providing amazing, resilient battery storage. But if you need more information before you make up your mind on whether to get battery storage installed, there are 2 videos popping up on the screen now which will really help you. I hope you enjoy.